Hello, I'm Paul Giamatti, and I'm here in the Criterion closet.
I watched all 8 of Paul Giamatti's Criterion closet picks and ranked them according to my own subjective opinion.
This is the movie that I think really pushed me over the edge and made me go, I want to be an actor.
First up, we have Blue Velvet. David Lynch is back at it again with another psychological thriller with layer after layer of thematic depth. This film at its core feels like a suburban housewife's nightmare. It's not quite based in reality, but it is real enough to make for a terrifying dream, especially for someone who has known nothing but white picket fences their entire lives. The opening scene shows this in a very subtle way as it opens on a dreamlike montage of a nice suburban neighborhood. Everything is pristine and beautiful, not a trouble in the world, until a man watering his garden all of a sudden suffers a stroke and falls to the ground. This contrast of the beauty of suburbia with the horror of someone having a stroke really gives the impression that the white picket fence is a facade. It's a barrier created by the middle class patrons as a way of keeping out anything negative, almost like a crucifix around the neck to ward off vampires. But the underbelly of life is always present and it is inevitable. This movie is great, and if you love David Lynch, and even if you don't love David Lynch, you should check this one out because it is his most accessible movie, I think, that I've seen. And also, Dennis Hopper is amazing in his role as Frank Booth. I rank it number 4.
This woman, Larissa Shapitko, I've only seen this movie Wings, but Wings is an amazing movie.
Wings tells the story of a former female fighter pilot who used to be a decorated war hero but is now working in a school as a principal. Because of this, the film is pretty minimalistic, not only in terms of lighting and camera movement and set design, but also in terms of plot. This film is not about what's happening on the outside, it's not about external consequences of actions so much as it is about the internal struggles of this woman. And the thing about internal struggles is that we can't actually see them, we have to experience them vicariously through some kind of psychological, emotional closure. And I think in order to experience this emotion, you do kind of need to relate to this character, at least in some regards. And to be honest, I don't really relate to this character much at all because they used to be successful at something, and I've never been successful at anything in my life. This character has experienced the highest of highs. They were a decorated war hero. They were at the top of their game, and then all of a sudden they came crashing back down to earth and are now having to grapple with their existence in a more mundane society, a less fulfilling role. And I have never experienced that high peak, so I don't know what it's like to come down from that. I'm still trying to get up to the peak, so me and this character are like on opposite sides of the mountain. Maybe in 30 years I'll be able to watch this film again and really appreciate it because my Oscar-winning days are behind me at that point, but as of now, I think this is my least favorite movie on this list. I rank it number 8.
I'm a big fan of these Val Lewton horror movies. Cat People.
You'd think a movie entitled Cat People would be kind of in the realm of the Universal horror movies like The Wolfman or Dracula or something, but it's not really like those kind of horror films. It's more of a psychological horror film. Instead, the drama in this film comes from plot devices like you might see in the movies Unsane or 10 Cloverfield Lane, where the drama comes from the idea that a crazy person you see on screen or someone that everyone else thinks is crazy might not actually be crazy. In this movie, Irina is the so-called crazy person who believes that she has descended from a line of people that turn into a cat-like monster when they are aroused or angered. So when she falls in love with Oliver Reed, problems arise when she doesn't want to consummate the marriage because she thinks she might kill him if they do. This film's plot is very creative in the way that it expresses themes of jealousy, sexual repression, and even the idea that women aren't taken as seriously as men when it comes to saying they have a health problem. This film is basically like The Hulk meets Shutter Island, and I think that's cool, and I think it's a pretty solid film, although I think some people will be disappointed in the fact that this movie is not like your typical Universal monster movie. I rank it number 6.
This is also one of my favorite movies. I'm a big fan of Frankenheimer's movies.
Next is the movie Seconds. I had no expectations for this movie coming in. I had no idea what it was about, but it did kind of blow me away. You could even say that when I was done watching, I wanted seconds. I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say that this movie is about a man who has found his life getting stale and boring, so he chooses to go on a mission to reinvent himself. And I think at some points in our lives, we can all relate to the desire to start over. I mean, I literally want to start over right now. But this film critiques the pursuit of superficial solutions to deeper problems, suggesting that no matter how much one changes their exterior circumstances, the inner self remains. Other than the grand themes of this movie, there are 3 things that stand out to me that make this movie amazing. First, Rock Hudson's performance as the main character, Tony Wilson, adds even more complexity to the themes of internal conflict and the desire to be accepted, because Rock Hudson was a closeted gay man for most of his Hollywood career. One of his boyfriends at the time, Lee Garlington, says that the two went to movie premieres together, but each one of them brought their own female date. Nobody in their right mind would come out, Garlington says. It was career suicide. We all pretended to be straight. The parallels of this real life situation to the themes of the movie are obvious if you have seen it, and it just adds that much more depth. Number 2, the cinematography is amazing. The camera work mirrors the main character's own experience of detachment and confusion, and it draws the audience into this unsettling experience. And number 3, the way that the plot is revealed in the first 30 minutes of this movie is pretty ingenious, because the director leaves out very crucial information, and that causes the audience to try to guess what's happening and probably guess wrongly. And it just leads to a very engaging movie where the motivations, or the audience's perceptions of the motivations of the characters, evolve through the entire runtime. I rank it number 2.
Another wonderful movie here that I love very much, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
So it seems like on every one of these Criterion Closet Picks lists, there is at least one film that is like super critically acclaimed that just does not connect with me. In the Iowa Debris Criterion Closet Pick list, it was Thief, and everyone got after me for that one. And on this one, it is this movie, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Directed by Michael Power and Emmerich Pressburger, this is an English film about a retired Army colonel and basically his entire career in the Army. But even though this character is epic in certain ways and is brilliantly portrayed by Roger Livesey, I just couldn't connect with him or the plot. And maybe it's worth me stating my bias here against big, epic, sprawling movies about a certain character's life that just has several time jumps in it. It's not my thing. A movie that shows you decades of someone's life is just not something that lends itself to me connecting with that character, because the time jumps also just mean that there isn't a straightforward plot. There's not a singular goal that this character is trying to achieve necessarily. There are a bunch of little different goals depending on which time period that you are seeing him in. Just think of it in terms of your own life. I mean, I'm sure you had different goals for yourself last year at this time than you do now. Much more, you had different goals 10 years ago than you do now. And so there's not really that hero's journey in the same way. There's not a plot like Lord of the Rings. I have to throw the thing into the thing. It's just more messy to me. However, like I said, I am the minority on this one. On Letterboxd, it has a 4.2, which is really good. So don't take my word for it. Go watch it if you like this kind of a movie. I will say that the one thing that stands out from this movie for me is the cinematography. It is absolutely gorgeous and should probably be watched just for that alone. I rank it number 7.
There's something that I love very much, which is the movie Carnival of Souls.
This story follows Mary Henry, who after getting into a car accident has lingering feelings of being haunted by a ghostly figure, played by the director Herc Harvey himself. By the way, we need to start naming kids Herc again. Speaking of Herc, he made this movie independently and for little money and called the film an exercise in weirdness. And I agree, this movie is very weird, but it's a weirdness that you can't quite put your finger on. It's not a overt weirdness like The Holy Mountain or something. It's a weirdness more in its atmosphere. It feels very off. Something about the way that this is shot and something about the characters reacting to one another just feels kind of like you're in a nightmare or you're separated from reality in some way. And that honestly ties into the themes of this film very well. The thing that I could not stop focusing on after I watched this movie, though, is the location, or one of the locations that they shot this film at, and that is the Great Saltaire in Salt Lake City, which used to be this big pier entertainment venue thing on the Salt Lake back in the early 1900s, and I just think it looks really cool and kind of surprising that they had something like that in the early 1900s. Unfortunately, it's not there today. There are ruins of it, apparently. I tried to go visit the ruins when I was in Salt Lake City last, and all I found were dead birds on the beach, but you can go try to find them if you want. I just thought it was really cool. I don't know why. I just like my brain focused on that. I guess because it contributed to the uneasy, weird feeling of the atmosphere. It's just a very weird location in general, and I think it was pretty ingenious to shoot there. I rank it number 5.
Rashomon.
I think the themes of this movie are some of the best themes in a movie of all time. In fact, since this movie came out, the themes and the plot have been replicated several times in movies such as The Usual Suspects or the masterpiece Hoodwinked. But I think Rashomon does it best. At its core, this film is about the unreliability of humanity, and this is told through a story where a murder is recounted through the eyes of 4 different people who witnessed it happen. And each time the story is recounted from a different person's perspective, the story changes. Every person tells the story with different details, and the question is why? Are they purposefully lying to cover up some uncomfortable truth, or is it simple human nature to misremember events and interpret them differently depending on your psychological state at the time? At a glance, this film feels like a typical murder mystery, but it is not a typical murder mystery. It is a murder mystery with a much grander theme, a much bigger purpose. And that purpose is to illustrate the idea that we don't know what we're talking about. It's about how do we, as humans, know what is true, especially when the things that we are being taught come from unreliable sources. And on top of that, we are all, at our core, unreliable sources because we have brain bugs and biases. We did not evolve to perceive the world completely truthfully. We did not evolve to have perfect critical thinking skills. We evolved to survive. And in some situations, the way to survive is to not think so critically about some things. Sometimes perceiving something that is not true is beneficial to our survival, and so is relaying untruthful information sometimes. And what gets me the most about this film is that it's not just showing us this human phenomenon of unreliability, it's showing us the director's struggles with it personally. And it does this in the form of the main character who is listening to all of these different stories being told and is clearly struggling with not only his perception of their perception of what happened, but also his perception of what happened. He's struggling with the eternal truth that humanity might not ever be able to achieve perfect truth. And especially in today's society where AI images are getting out of hand, the idea that humans are not reliable in the information that they share is a completely earth-shattering one, especially for someone who grew up with the idea that truth was easy to find. This revelation can literally break down all truth structures in a person's mind and cause them to question every single thing that they have ever been taught. And I think this film wouldn't be nearly as powerful if it didn't show this internal struggle in the main character. I rank it third.
This is always a thing that I love. Solaris.
Andrei Tarkovsky is honestly one of my favorite directors of all time, probably partly because his filmography is so small that I actually have the time to watch all of his movies, but yeah, it's just good to see his name on this list. If you watch this film, you might see a lot of similarities to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is interesting because Tarkovsky is famous for not really liking 2001: A Space Odyssey and wanting to create a more human-focused film for his 1972 endeavor. At the center of this idea is the main character, Chris, who is struggling with the death of his wife. The plot of the film revolves around Chris, a psychologist, arriving to a space station to investigate the death of a doctor and the mental problems of the astronauts on the station. And when he gets there, it turns out that actually the space station that he's on is orbiting some weird planet that's doing some weird. It seems to be creating hallucinations in these astronauts based on their own repressed desires and traumas. At its core, this is a very philosophical kind of movie that tackles themes of memory, grief, human connection, reality and the perception of reality, and the search for meaning. And it's one of those films that's going to have a different impact on every single person who watches it. Some people might love it, some people might cry, some people might hate it. So just I don't know who to recommend this movie to. I think it's great and I want to see more movies like this in today's world, but it's honestly one of those movies that I just know some people are going to hate, so it's hard for me to recommend it to everyone. But if you like philosophy and you like philosophical movies, then watch this one because it is one of my favorites. I rank this film number 1. Thank you, Paul Giamatti, and thank you, Criterion, for putting these videos up because I love them and I love using them as a way to watch new films that I would have never even thought to see in the first place. So thank you, and for everybody watching, put in the comments who you want me to review next. Goodbye.